Grab yourself a bottle, Bronco Nation. It's time to review Boise State versus San Diego State. Welcome into Horseshoe Spirit Studios. I could not think of a more fitting sponsor for the channel in the current circumstances that we find ourselves as a fan base than Horseshoe Spirit Studios. The perfect alcohol for the Boise State fan. The fan that is looking back to the glory days and hoping they can do something to get us back there in the future. Horseshoe Spirits. Buy yourself a bottle and you'll contribute to Boise State's NIL fund through the Horseshoe Collective. If you're looking for a way to look back on the glory years of Boise State football and remember those good old times around the fire with friends, Horseshoe Spirits. And if you're trying to find a way to survive the current state of Boise State football, Horseshoe Spirits has got your back. So if you are in Boise, you can check out Horseshoe Spirits at any liquor store in the southwest of Idaho. And now, very popular brand, so they may sell out from time to time, but just make sure you ask for it by name. They should be able to get it in for you. Obviously, make sure you're 21 or older. And then, obviously, we also have the website available as well. That's a huge thing that we've been announcing on the channel last couple of videos. The website available that you can purchase if you don't get the blessing of living in Boise proper. If you have to suffer through some of these games alone on your couch, you got a friend next to you. Make sure you purchase it at the Horseshoe Spirits website. I will put a link to it in the description. You buy 6 or more bottles, you get the shipping free. And if it's 3 to 6, then the shipping's going to be 50% off. Remember that Christmas times are coming and holidays or whatever you celebrate are coming. And those Boise State fans in your life, they need a pick-me-up right now. They need something to get them through this period, through the bowl season, because it's not going to be good. And I tell you what, Horseshoe Spirits is the perfect gift for any Boise State fan in your life. So make sure you check out Horseshoe Spirits. Thank you for sponsoring the channel and this video. All right. Boise State versus San Diego State. I will be completely honest right now. This is probably the furthest I've gotten into the video so far. I have tried to start this video 13 to 14 times right now. I've lost count. It's just, I can't find the words to describe what we saw, and it's been 24 hours. I tried to delay making this video because I didn't want to be emotional in my analysis and my review. I wanted my analytical side to shine through because I feel that Boise State right now is at a turning point for the program. They are at a fulcrum point, and dependent on which side that Boise State leans, this will determine the direction of this program going forward. Because I've got news for you. Boise State isn't Boise State anymore. Not the way that we think of Boise State. The fans that grew up, not just during the Kellen Moore era, but it's not like that was the only successful time in Boise State history. I can't stand it when people pretend that the only standard for Boise State is the Kellen Moore era. That was this huge golden moment, and then every other year was a disappointment. I think at one point that was probably true because people were disappointed with Brian Harsin. I told you, only came in and got you to 10-plus wins pretty much every single year in top 25. And so, yeah, there was a time where the standard was the Kellen Moore era, but Boise State is more than the Kellen Moore era. While that may not be necessarily the top 10 type level program, has not necessarily been the trend for Boise State throughout its entire history, they have been a consistently winning program. A top 25 at least type program that gets you to 10 or more wins and is in the conversation among the top teams in the group of 5, now group of 6. One of those teams that's either in the New Year's 6 or in the competition for the New Year's 6 or should be in the playoffs. That is who Boise State should be. That is who Boise State has been. And right now I'm using the word has been because in the last 6 years, don't count COVID with weird stuff, 5 years for Boise State, they have had only 2 seasons where they've gotten to 10 or more wins. And in 4 of those seasons, including one of the seasons where they got to 10 wins, in 4 out of the last 5 seasons, Boise State has lost 4 or more games. I'm going to say that again because it is an absolutely astonishing statistic. In the last 5 years, out of 4 out of those 5 years, Boise State has lost 4 or more games. And there's excuses that you can throw around. Some of them we've even talked about, and I've been guilty of on the channel. Andy Avalos. We losing Ashton Genty. But at this point, the excuses, they're coming up hollow. Because at a certain point, those seasons don't become the anomaly anymore. They become the norm. College football has seen the Boise States of the world come and go. And not that any school is Boise State, but the schools that have tremendous success over decades, that lead college football, they have seen those schools come and go. Now, some teams find a way to overcome a rough patch and come back dominant and be an elite level program again. And some schools don't. And it all depends on what the true standards of that university are. What are the standards that the fans hold that university to? Which is pretty generic because fans always typically have high standards for. But more than that, what are the standards that the institution holds itself to? Boise State put CFP on their wall. Think about this. Every single day that Boise State holds a film session in this season, and coming for the rest of this week and the rest of this season, Boise State's players have to sit in a room with a huge television screen, or it's a projector screen, and the words written CFP, crossed out bowl, CFP written on the wall. They have to see that every day. So there should be a standard. There should be a fire. There should be a direction for this program. And right now, Boise State doesn't seem to have one. We're going to go through the offense, defense, special teams, and my keys to the game. We will hit those. But the overall focus of this video is, what did this game tell us about Boise State? What are the warning signs that I pointed out in the UNR game that have played full through now? Where is Boise State finding itself, and what do they need to do to be the team that we remember in the future? Because we're at a point right now that there is a chance that our kids are not going to remember Boise State the way we remember Boise State. We have been incredibly lucky. We've had 3 generations. You think the generation that came into it, and the generation, then my dad afterwards, and then me. I was, and I'm 96 baby, so I was 10 years old when Boise State went to the first Fiesta Bowl. And we've had a solid 2 going on close to 3, but really more 2 generations that remember who Boise State is. But we're losing that because this next generation isn't seeing that Boise State program. I mean, it's not just Boise State fans. People are tuning in that haven't tuned in for a while to Boise State, and they're asking on Twitter, who is this team? How are you one injury away? How are you one injury away from what we saw last night? One injury. One injury away. And I'm not saying that Boise State has lost their quarterback in the past and always won. I mean, obviously, when Hank Bachmeier went down in 2019, Chase Cord steps up and he wins a game, and then he loses a game to BYU, and then, he gets hurt, and Jalen Henderson comes up. But even in that, they won games. And that's a real great example of what Boise State should be, because it's not that you necessarily win every game, but you win games. And even the games you lose, it's not a complete meltdown. Even the BYU game that Cord lost, and it's not Cord, the team loses, but I think it'd be different if you had Bachmeier or even Henderson starting. But even in that game, Boise State was competitive all the way to the end. We didn't line up against Georgia. We didn't play Notre Dame this week. We played San Diego State with an injured quarterback. A quarterback who was questionable last week versus Hawaii, got hurt again, and was injured this week. A quarterback for San Diego State that was only able to pass for 17 yards, and that was not just the elements. He is injured. That is who beat Boise State 17-10, and it should have been more. And that does remind me to throw out the score prediction challenge. I have not been good at that the last 2 games because I have not been in the right emotional state or mental state to remember that. But hey, we're going to throw it out now. I know it's kind of out of tune here, but we're going to throw it out right now because this score prediction wasn't just nailing the score prediction. This person should have their own channel because they nailed this game. A perfect prediction. Let's hear it out. James Ware predicts 10-17, so only 3 points off for the final score on Boise State's side. Said defense keeps us somewhat in it. Feels like San Diego State should have won by more than 7. Not enough oomph on offense. It does. Boise State was never in this game. Never in this game, even when they tied it up and they had that one really good drive. Towards the end of that drive, Boise State puttered out. They had two straight. I mean, they're doing all these great things. They're finally running it creatively. They're pushing on the edge. Side Gaines has a huge run on the outside. Boise State is finally being creative in the running game. They have a pass to keep the drive going. They are finally putting it together. And then in the red zone against one of the top 10 defenses in the country for stopping the run, Boise State in the red zone, where, I mean, it is even more so than the rest of the drive that they are stacking the line. They have nothing else behind them. The corners are playing 3-4 yards off. You run it up the middle twice. Not just that, you ran it up the middle 3 times and got lucky. Dylan Riley should have been stopped. He makes an amazing move on what is a draw play up the middle. He makes an amazing move right there at the point of contact, avoids, jump step, runs it in for a touch. It was completely Dylan Riley effort play. Even on that drive should have ended in a field goal or maybe missed field goal. Boise State was not in this game from beginning to end, and there's a reason for that. There's actually several reasons for that we're going to walk through in this video. But the biggest reason overall that Boise State is not the program that we remember right now is the coaching staff. It is 100% the coaching staff. I pointed this out in my last video. How do you find yourself in a position where your 2 backups, because Martinez ended up starting over net in this game, your 2 walk-on backups are your only option at quarterback? And I'm not saying that you can't do great things as a walk-on. Boise State has a strong history of walk-ons. Walk-ons do well at Boise State, and they do a great job of developing them. But at quarterback, that is not a position that you want a walk-on sitting behind. Because a walk-on needs an opportunity to develop and gain experience. Quarterback position is someone you need to turn to when they need to win right now with little to no development, and they need to have experience. They need to have experience and some proven potential, because that is the heart and soul of the entire team. And Boise State found itself in a place where they didn't have a backup. If your backups are 2 walk-on quarterbacks, and again, I'm not attacking walk-ons in general, but as a principal for a school of Boise State's level, I mean, if you're playing in Conference USA or somewhere else, then you probably get away with it. But a school of Boise State's level playing in one of the top conferences, still one of the top conferences in the group of 5, not a conference that you can just take a game off, as we have seen, and still win. When you are playing in a top conference, the group of 5, when you have the target on your back that Boise State does, it is not acceptable in any sense of the word to find yourself in a position where you're 1 injury away from your entire season being over. It's unfathomable. It's unfathomable. And like I said in the last video, it's 100% on Spencer Danielson. 100% on Spencer Danielson for not, as the head coach of this program, going after the quarterback position aggressively. He is a great relational builder and mentor. He is. Nobody is arguing that. As a life coach, there's nobody you want on your side other than Spencer Danielson. But there are questions being raised about head coach right now. Because as a head coach, it's not about how much you trust your quarterback or how much of a relationship you have with him. Unless they are Kellen Moore, you make sure there's a backup in place. And you make sure that backup has a chance to compete against the starter. Every single quarterback for Boise State has had to fight for their job. Every single one has had a quarterback competition where they have had to fight for their job. Even Brett Rippon. We bring in Montel Cozart, starter at Kansas, to come play for Boise State. You know, that's a guy that is playing at a Power 5, at the time, Power 5 level, comes to Boise State. That is the type of competition that Boise State has. We love our players here at Boise State. There is a culture that every player I've talked to, both former and present, says that is different than anywhere else in college football. It is a family. But even within that, doesn't mean that just because your family, you get to drive the car. You have to earn it. You have to earn it. And Boise State didn't make Max Madsen earn it this year. They did not make him earn it, and he needed to. After what we saw last year, it should have been an open competition for quarterback. And I'm not saying he could not have won it, but it should have been an open competition for quarterback, because nothing that we saw last year indicated that on his own he could go out and win a college football game. Nothing that we saw last year indicated that. And he has been pretty good for Boise State, but we've lost 2 games under Max Madsen. So it's not like this season was all as it should have been. And everybody's saying, don't you miss Max Madsen now? Well, yeah, of course we miss Max Madsen now because he was all that we had. But that Boise State should never have been in a position where all that they had was Max Madsen. They should have been in a position where they had a open competition, where they created a quarterback out of that competition that could be the best or one of the best in the group of 5. And that could have been Max Madsen. He could have won it. He's already beaten 2 quarterbacks, one of whom went out and is doing incredible things. The team sucks around him, but Taylor Green is doing incredible things. I mean, athletically, one of the best Boise State quarterbacks athletically that we've ever recruited. And Max Madsen beat him out. And I don't think that it was simply because there was bias and favoritism, as some people claim. I think Max Madsen beat him out because iron sharpens iron. But Boise State did not bring any iron to sharpen this quarterback competition. And Max Madsen did not deserve to simply have this job without a fight. And that is why we find ourselves here. Because if you don't have a backup in the modern day of college football, if you don't have a backup who thinks that they are worthy of being a starter and have a chance to compete for that, you're not going to have a worthy backup who can be a starter for you. You're just not going to. And sometimes you accept that. Sometimes you have a great quarterback who is so good and you have a scheme around him that you know this is okay. We're going to ride this player all the way through. I'm going to protect this player all the way through and we're going to be fine. And we're still going to go get somebody who could be better than a walk-on because at the end of the day, regardless whether you believe my argument or not is valid, and I know some people disagree, whether you believe my argument or not is valid that the reason Boise State doesn't have a starter is because they didn't have an open competition or someone who believed they could come in and compete. So whether you believe that argument is valid or not, a team of Boise State's level should not be in a position where their only 2 backups are walk-ons. It's inconceivable. No other school in Boise State's position, even with established quarterbacks, is facing this situation. Not one. And that is because of a complete lack of a sense of urgency by this coaching staff to bring someone in because they're not playing to dominate and win. They are playing not to lose. And that brings us to the entire problem here overall. For this Boise State program, there is no sense of fire or direction for this team. And it is coming from the coaching staff. And that brings us back to what I was trying to raise earlier with Spencer Danielson. And I think that there is some valid criticism that I have not been critical enough of what Spencer Danielson has been responsible for this season. My focus is trying to make sure we understand the circumstances that Spencer Danielson is having to coach in, okay? That is my focus, and that's why I bring up Andy Avalos, because he's still having an effect on this team. But the environment that you are having to build a program out of is important to know. And I think everybody just assumed that as soon as Andy Avalos was gone, Boise State was back in the pre-Andy Avalos, and we were building a program out of Harsons and Petersons and everybody else, Hawk and Cutter and everyone. We were building a program out of their Boise State, and we weren't. We were building a program out of Avalos' Boise State, a program that had a toxic culture, that had players and coaches leaving his staff and his team because they didn't want to play and work with him. That the moment that he was fired, players that tried to come back to the team, shows you how toxic that environment was. That is the culture of Boise State that we are now facing. It's not the culture of necessarily the blue-collar, family, work ethic, going at it as a warrior ethos with a mission teams of the past. That mentality, that standard at Boise State, that's not what Avalos developed, and that's why he was fired. That is why he was fired, because he destroyed the culture. It wasn't just about the wins or losses. It's because he destroyed the culture of Boise State, and that's why he left. That is where Spencer Danielson comes from. But we're not products of our environment. It's an element, it's a factor, but we're all responsible for our own actions and purpose. So Spencer Danielson, we need to understand where he's building from. We need to understand how difficult that is. But we also, at the same time, need to understand that you are responsible for the culture of your program now. And the culture of the program now is a culture that is undisciplined, that cannot tackle, cannot catch, cannot play without penalties, either on offense or defense. A culture that cannot do the simple things right, that has special teams errors across the board. If you want to look at an indicator that a program has a cultural deficiency, look at their special teams play. How do they do the little things, the mundane things, the things that aren't exciting, that are boring to practice? How do they do the little things right? Chris Peterson's teams, Harson's teams, those teams knew how to play because they knew how to do the little things right, and it showed out in their special teams play. This Boise State team does not. And that is a massive, massive indictment on Spencer Danielson. This is not a Spencer Danielson needs to be fired video. I want to make that clear. We're not at that point yet. We are not at that point yet. But when I talk about a fulcrum moment for the team, it rests on the head coach. So the direction that Boise State goes now, whether they go in the direction of where Boise State should be, putting themselves back on track to be a program that is not just a team that wins games, but a team that competes like no other, that shows creativity like no other, because they are willing to push the envelope, because they are looking for ways to set themselves apart, because they don't just want to go out there and win the game, because a win is not just a win for them. They are looking for ways to put themselves on the front edge of college football and grab the limelight and put it on where it deserves to be, which is on the blue turf. That is what Boise State should be. A Boise State team that, regardless of the results, is coming in with fire, playing to the end, and always has a chip on their shoulder until the whistle blows on the final second. That is Boise State. Now, if Spencer Danielson can bring Boise State back to that, which I do not think is off the table, I think he is capable of doing that. But if he is able to bring Boise State back to that, then he deserves to stay. If he can't, then he'll deserve to be fired. We're not there yet. But there are questions, and it all depends on what he does next right now. Because while nobody questions Spencer Danielson's capability to be a leader, to be a mentor, while nobody questions Spencer Danielson's capability to be a mentor, to be a raiser of young men, he does a fantastic job in both his levels. I don't think anybody can question him, as like I said, as a life coach. Nobody could question him. But there are a lot of organizations and opportunities to develop character. It is an element of college football. It is certainly an element of college football. But the reason that you play football is to win. It is a job. At the end of the day, especially now in the NIL era, at the end of the day, it is a job. And your coach is not your best friend or even necessarily primarily your mentor. He is your boss. He is who you answer to based on your work performance. That is who your head coach is. Now, there's a lot of coaching as a whole is one of the hardest professions. It really is, because you have to tread the line of everything. It's not just simply a boss's hat. It is also a mentor's hat. In some cases, it's a father-type figure hat, which I think Spencer Danielson does carry that as well. You have to play the role of athletic trainer, of skill creator and grower, and then you also have to hold the hammer as judge as well. It is tough. It is incredibly tough, but that's why not everybody is a head coach. It's not as hard to be a coordinator or to be a unit coach, because at that point you're low enough on the level that you get to really focus on the investment and developing and the building up of the young men that you're coaching. And Spencer Danielson is fantastic at that. But when you're head coach for the hard decisions. You are the one on the team that has to be able to say, we're not meeting the standard. And while I may love you, I may hold you in high esteem as an individual, you are not what is needed for this team to succeed, because I have to hold the team first. When you are the head coach, it cannot be about, I need to protect the defense, or I need to protect the offense, or I need to protect this unit, or I need to protect my player. You are protecting the team. The entire team comes into the equation. And if you truly love that team, just like I say as a fan, if you truly love that team, you hold it accountable, comes back to being a head coach. It comes down to accountability. As the head coach, you're there for the hard decisions. That's why you're the head coach. Again, you have all those other roles underneath your hat. But the reason that you are paid the big bucks of everybody on the team, you're the highest paid position, the reason you are the boss is so that you are able to make the hard decisions. And when you have a performance like we saw this game, and you come out in a press conference and you say that you have absolute confidence in your offensive coordinator, in Nate Potter, that you're not running from facts, but you're not losing confidence. How are you fulfilling your job as the head coach? Your job as the head coach is not to be the cheerleader of your players and of your coaching staff. Your job as the head coach is to make sure your team wins. And you don't necessarily have to say, yeah, I'm going to fire Nate Potter. You don't have to say that, especially if you haven't made that decision. You don't have to come out and blast your staff. You don't have to do that. But there are plenty of ways to indicate that the standard is not being met without starting to use absolute terminology, literal word, absolute terminology that indicates something that is not true or shouldn't be true. Because then you start to lose confidence from the fan base. Nothing that you have seen from Nate Potter in any game except UNLV, which was against the worst defense in the not the worst, but one of the worst defenses in the country. Nothing you have seen from Nate Potter should allow you to formulate the word absolute confidence in your head. There is nothing that you should see. In fact, when I talk about Boise State teams, when I talk about teams in general needing to make decisions to preserve their program and to make key changes when the standard is not met at a certain level, nothing speaks louder than that than the offensive coordinator position right now. The offensive coordinator position right now for Boise State is not where it needs to be at the end of the day. And it's not a position that you have the time and the luxury of simply hoping it figures itself out. Because recruits, both currently committed and incoming recruits, are going to look at the future of your program based on who is in control of that program right now. And if I was an offensive recruit looking at Boise State, I wouldn't see a lot of things that would get me excited about playing here right now. There is a complete lack of creativity. There's a complete lack of balance. There's a complete lack of any sense of urgency, and an offense that shows a complete inability to adjust, and it all goes back to Nate Potter. There are issues with Spencer Danielson right now. Not issues that I think raise the level of being fired yet. I think that we are at a position right now with Spencer Danielson where we're looking back and going, okay, Ashton Jeanty took us to the Fiesta Bowl and took us to the CFP. And you brought back Ashton Jeanty. You did good things. And for anything else, hiring Spencer Danielson to get Ashton Jeanty to be a Boise State player one more year was worth it. Regardless of what else happens, it was worth it. But that was 1 year with Ashton Jeanty. This is a year without Ashton Jeanty, and this is the team that we see. I'm not saying he needs to be fired, and I think that he has still the opportunity to turn this program around. But you are certainly, or should be, getting into a position where you are starting to ask, what is the direction of this program and who is taking us there? And so while the seat isn't necessarily on fire or heating up or even necessarily warm, the seat has been presented. It is now sitting in the room, and they're starting to stack, especially the fan base, they're starting to stack the wood under it. They haven't lit the spark yet, but you have to prove that you as head coach can make the tough decisions, that you can go beyond the relational level of coaching and get into the executive level of coaching, that you can do that. Nate Potter needs to be removed from his position. He is not the offensive coordinator for Boise State. I'm not saying that Nate Potter can't be an offensive coordinator in the future, but he can't be an offensive coordinator at Boise State. Not with where this program is at right now. If Nate Potter was inheriting Ashton Jeanty from last year, or a team with an established, determined offense, a reliable quarterback, and a strong running back, any team really from 2019 all the way back, if he was inheriting any of those teams, then maybe he could be in a position as a brand new, fresh-faced offensive coordinator to find a way to be successful. The team would carry him as he worked through his rookie stage, and he could find a way to get himself developed into a position where he has the adjustment capability to be an offensive coordinator. Because it's not just simply about knowing the X's and O's and being the smartest guy. It's about how can you analyze the reaction of the other team, outthink them, and make the right adjustments. Coaching, especially at the coordinator level, is all about the adjustments. That is the key part, and something Chenander overall this season has done really, really well. We are seeing the deficiencies of having a rookie offensive coordinator who is promoted from the position of offensive line coach into the role of a position that doesn't deal with a lot of creativity and skill. I mean, not that offensive line aren't skilled, but skilled players is what I'm talking about. The creativity element of play calling. That is the position he finds himself. And again, it's not that he doesn't necessarily have the intellectual level. I think that he does. I think that he would be a great augmentee to this staff as the offensive line coach in his position from last year. You look at one unit on the team that has taken the biggest step back from last season, it's the offensive line. And I think part of that is the fact that you don't have Nate Potter there. I really do think that. I think that Nate Potter was one of the reasons, because I think he is a really good positional coach. Part of the reason that Boise State has taken such a huge step back is that Potter is so busy with an offense that has not been doing well, an offense that in many cases has been failing. You have taken him from his position where he was really good at offensive level. They talk about promoting beyond competency and put him at the position of offensive coordinator. And he just isn't working out in that role. And I think that has been proved. And I think at this point, you have to save not just this season, but next season. You have to give the fans, not necessarily just the fans, you have to give the recruits, you have to give the team something that they can build on going into next year. And after this game, after a bye week, to have the performance that we did from Boise State, where they repeatedly ran, like they've done all season long, ran the exact same plays over and over and over again, and not just that, we're unable to adjust. That shows an offensive coordinator who may have the intellectual level, but he doesn't have the reactive level. He can't adjust. He cannot adjust when the game plan doesn't go the way that it needs to. UNR, perfect example. Comes in with a game plan, doesn't work, solidly sticks with it to the end. Should have lost that game. We didn't, but we should have, and that was the warning signs. Fresno State has a game plan for Maddox Madsen. Maddox Madsen goes out. In comes Cutforth. No changes to the game plan. Unable to adjust. In this game, San Diego State, the rain they come in with trying to be a little bit more balanced. They're trying to throw. The rain prevents them from being able to do that. That's fair. That's a valid point. They have to lean on the run. The run's being successful. Okay, the run's successful for Boise State, so they stop throwing the ball. Well, the rain stops in the second half, and also the running stops in the second half. Boise State goes from 134 yards of offense overall, 121 of those being rushing. They have 121 yards rushing in the first half. In the second half, they had 40. 43 to be exact. 43 yards rushing in the second half. The running stops, the rain stops, but Boise State doesn't stop running it. They keep doing the exact same play call. They stopped throwing the ball, period, for almost an entire quarter for Boise State. For an entire quarter, they stopped throwing the ball. And it is not until the last drive of the game that Boise State finally makes a change when they have to, unleashes Cutforth, and Cutforth ends up having an amazing drive, and that just made the game worse. I wish that he hadn't. I wish that Cutforth had ended this game with what he showed in the first half, which was 13 yards passing, because then I could at least have sat back and gone, well, it was never going to be. We never had a quarterback that could win this game. Cutforth showed he could potentially win this game against a San Diego State team that gave them every opportunity to do it. A San Diego State team that if we had anybody else at backup quarterback, anyone else at backup quarterback, if you pick a backup quarterback from any other team, I mean, that is an exaggeration. I'm using absolute terminology, letting my emotions get away a little bit. Almost any other backup quarterback in college football, Boise State wins that game. But because we don't have a backup quarterback, Max Cutforth, even despite all of that, has a chance to win this game. Has a chance to win this game if they allow Cutforth to be Cutforth. That last drive showed us what Cutforth could do, and I know they're coming up against a softer pressure. They're playing a little bit more of a pre-vet defense. There's only about 5 minutes left. Boise State used their timeouts, or most of them. They were in a position of desperation. I understand that. It's a bit like Maddox Madsen having good performances against, Memphis and late moments and that kind of thing. I understand that, but at the same time, he's finding windows in some tight coverages. He is showing that he can throw the ball. The wide receivers are catching, which they weren't doing earlier on. Boise State could have been doing that in the second half. And I'm not saying you have to come out and pass all the time like this last drive of the game. You didn't have to necessarily do that. But you could have passed some. It could have been a factor in the offense. And Potter goes away from it. Passing game's not working. We're going to go back to the run game that we planned. We're just going to take out the passing elements. And no adjustment made until the very final end of the game. Inability to adjust as offensive coordinator. And this is nothing personal against Nate Potter. He's a former player for Boise State. He was part of the Doug Martin era of Boise State. He did incredible things as an offensive lineman for Boise State, and I want him to be a coach on this team. I want him to be a part of this team. I think his brain needs to be a part of this team. I think his ability to develop players needs to be part of this team. He just doesn't need to be calling the plays. That's not his area of expertise. It's just not. And maybe he can go somewhere else and develop himself as an offensive coordinator and come back. But you should not be developing offensive coordinators at Boise State. That is not the place to do it. Boise State is the elite school in the Mountain West, traditionally. And even now, historically, maybe even this year they're off, but they're still the team everyone's going after because they're the standard. They're the standard, not just in the Mountain West, but in the group of 6. They are the program that everyone talks about in hushed tones and wants to be. That's who Boise State is. That should not be a developmental program for coaches. There are some exceptions where you can take a coach who's been part of the team already, knows the culture, proven themselves, and promote them into head coach. Obviously, we did that with Chris Peterson. Obviously, we did that eventually. Brian Harsin, even though technically he went to Arkansas State and came back, he did develop himself a little bit. We've done that in the past, right? That's not necessarily wrong to do at that level in those certain circumstances. But to be a developmental position for coordinators like Boise State is right now, and I know they have, to a certain extent, been that in the past with established offenses. You can't be both a developmental team and a developmental program for coordinators. You can't be both of them at the same time. You just cannot be both. One of those positions has to have some experience, some stability, something to be able to make up for the deficiencies of the other while they get themselves and find the ropes underneath themselves. You cannot be both. And Boise State did not have the offense that in any way should have justified Nate Potter taking over from it. Boise State should have gone with a more experienced hire, and they needed an experienced hand on the helm. I'm not saying they needed Cutter, but they needed an experienced hand on the helm, and Potter was not it. Potter 100% should not have been. This is not his fault. He shouldn't have been in this position. Boise State should have found somebody else, and Potter should have had an opportunity to develop himself, go somewhere else, develop himself there at a developmental program, go Utah State or somewhere, develop yourself, and then come back to Boise State. That's what Boise State should be. And right now, Potter, if Boise State wants to have any future in 2026, Potter has to go, and the sooner, if it's going to happen, it's going to have to happen. If Boise State goes into 2026 with Potter at the helm, this is going to be a team that does not go in the direction that it should go as a program. This is the hard decision. This is the turning point. This is the moment. Can Spencer Danielson make the toughest? It's hard. The hardest decision you make is to remove somebody from their position. Can he make the toughest decision as the head coach because he's the head coach, because that's his job? Can he show that he has that capability to coach? That's what coaching is. It's making the tough decisions. Can he do it? Nothing we've seen in the press conference indicates that. And that, for me, leaves me it's part of the reason my emotions are still high in this one, even more hopeless than I was coming into after the loss. Because I wanted to hear something in the press conference that indicated there was accountability. And I know that accountability happens in the background, that's great, but it should also happen to a certain extent in public. And nothing in that press conference indicated to me, other than, this isn't to our standard, this isn't to our standard, this is on me, this is on me. Personal accountability, that's not the role of the head coach necessarily to project. Okay? Yes, it's on you. It's on you because you put the people there. So how are you going to fix it? If you start saying things like, I have absolute confidence, it indicates that you're not doing things you need to fix it. So yes, personal accountability is important because it is on you as the head coach. That means that it's also on you to fix it. And the way you fix it is you make sure you have the right people in position to do the job. And right now, Potter's not the person. You have somebody who could be. You have Zach Hill on this staff. Zach Hill, who was offensive coordinator for Boise State from 2017 to 2019. And I know he wasn't everybody's favorite offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying he should be necessarily the offensive coordinator in 2026. But he did good things. It wasn't the greatest offensive coordinator role, but he did good things for Boise State. Boise State's offense during that time, 2017-2019, was explosive and balanced. And the deep ball was a huge factor. And Boise State developed quarterbacks. And they had a lot of creativity. And there's other coordinators that have been better. But it was still a very good offense, especially compared to where we're at now. Why is Zach Hill not the offensive coordinator right now? Why was he not the offensive coordinator after the UNR game? And to stand here after San Diego State and say, we're just going to gut this out to the end, that's a gut punch. Because that's not Boise State. Boise State has a standard, and when you don't meet that standard, changes are made and should be made. The fact that that is not happening for this program, I used this on Twitter talking about the Pac-12 deal, and I know that probably wasn't the best use of terms, but I mean, it's perfect in this one. It's devastating. It's devastating as a Boise State fan to see the standard that this program established for itself, that so many student athletes worked to build here at Boise State, doesn't appear to be there anymore. That's devastating. I mean, it truly is. And so for Boise State in this one, offensively, I know we didn't go through every single drive, but I don't think any of you want to do that. It was a poor game, 134 yards, in the first half, 268 overall. Better passing, most of that coming on one drive for Boise State. But 164 yards of total rushing in this game, but most of that coming in the first half. Individual players stepped up. Dylan Riley had a good game. Sarah Gaines had a good game. But that's really one more point on this, and I know that we've talked about the offense for almost 40 minutes here, and I don't want this to be an hour and a half video. But that's one more point on Potter, is he can't make the adjustments. He can't scheme appropriately for the defenses he's facing or make those adjustments when that scheme changes. And he doesn't know how to manage his players. You have Dylan Riley and Sarah Gaines, two great running backs. And you're still handing the ball off in key situations to a running back who has not proven himself consistent in this game, or really in any games. Malik Sherrod, you should not be in a situation where you're running three running backs unless you know that all three running backs, and have proven that all three running backs, are deserving of being in that situation. And Malik Sherrod has had some moments, and I think there's a role for him on this team. I think he's great as a punt returner. I think he'd be great as a flex player, putting him out at wide receiver occasionally, rolling him back into the backfield for some specifically designed plays, putting him in as a, kind of a Cam Bates kind of role where he's doing the sweeps. He's got some good speed on him. I think there's a role for Malik Sherrod in this offense. But it shouldn't be running the ball on key situations when you have Dylan Riley and Sarah Gaines. I see Sarah Gaines as very similar in some ways to, a traditional running back for Boise State with that speed and power and maneuverability. And maybe a Holani-esque in some ways. So I think he's a different athlete, obviously, than Holani. And then Sarah Gaines is much more that power back, a Van Buren type running back. I think they're a good combo. I think what we saw the carry, 21 carries for Riley, 13 carries for Gaines. I think that's fair. I think they're a good change of pace. But that should be your offense, and that should be where you're building your identity. The fact that Nate Potter doesn't seem to know how to handle the players, and I said it was going to be the toughest thing to find out where he was at as an offensive coordinator, was how does he handle this level of talent? No proven talent. You have four running backs at the time because John Dubar wasn't hurt. Hadn't been announced as hurt or injured. But you have four running backs who have all shown different levels of capability and explosiveness. How do you handle that offense? How do you handle that lineup? Was going to be the biggest question. Can he do it? And he can't. He can't. And for that reason, along with everything else, lack of urgency, offense in the second and in the end of the first half for Boise State, that has a minute and 4 seconds on the clock. They've used all their timeouts to set themselves up for that. They run one play for 6 yards. Then they take over 30 seconds to line up for the second play. They try to do a sweep to Dylan Riley to get him on the outside. He doesn't end up being able to break it free, and then they just go to halftime. Why use your timeouts? Why give San Diego State the opportunity to set themselves up to score, to give them the time to get their offense in position at the goal line, and then come out and do that? It's another critique on Spencer Danielson and his ability to coach. He cannot clock manage. It's been his biggest deficiency. It was an issue versus UCLA, and it's been an issue throughout this entire season. I've called it out in multiple videos, and this was a perfect example of that. Use all your 3-year timeouts. Okay, what are you going to do with them? If your goal is, let's just see if Dylan Riley breaks one, well, why not show a sense of urgency? It's not like he got stopped for negative yards. It was 6 yards. You're 2nd and 4. And the second carry was for 2 or 3. So now it's 3rd and 1. But San Diego State can't throw the ball. So the worst case scenario is you don't get it. You punt it to them with 30 seconds left on the clock. They're not going to do anything with it. The environment and conditions are terrible. Why not come out with a sense of urgency? 6 plays, run, 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 run. That's fine, but do it with some sense of expediency and urgency. And there's nothing on this team. There's no fire. There's no spark. There's the coals aren't even laid. They're still in the bag. There is nothing in this offense right now that is showing anything that is not just creativity, but urgency and direction. We talk about directionless program. It is in the offense right now that we see that the most. I've actually been really impressed with the defense, even though today wasn't their best game, or last night wasn't their best game. But offense for Boise State has been directionless this entire season. And while I am not calling for Spencer Danielson to be fired, and I want to make that very clear because I have been critical of him because he deserves to be criticized right now. I'm not calling for him to be fired, but I am calling for him to make the tough decision. And if he can't make the tough decision, that's when other people have to make the tough decision. So we'll see where Boise State's offense goes. This is an F, I think, quite clearly, overall performance. For the defense for Boise State, they gave up. I mean, they had 3 good drives where they just dominated and stopped San Diego State. And Boise State's offense had 4 drives where they did absolutely nothing and had to punt the ball. And the defense gave up. And back-to-back huge explosive run drives for San Diego State ends in touchdown. To Boise State's credit, they did stop those points in the second half, but the points don't tell the full story because San Diego State controlled time possession in the second half. They only had 12 minutes and about 16 seconds time possession in the first half, but in the second half, they had 16 minutes time of possession. So even while the points weren't there, the yardage still allowing huge broken tackles, couldn't stop them on key downs, 3rd, 4th down situations. San Diego State may not have ended every drive in a touchdown, but they did do what they needed to do against Boise State offense that proved they couldn't do anything. They did what they needed to do, which was grind out the clock. They were more conservative in the second half as well because they understood what their role was as an offense for San Diego State. So San Diego State's offense was more conservative, and that was a factor in why, while they may not have put up the same points, they did control the clock and achieved their goal, and Boise State was unable to stop them. San Diego State did exactly what they wanted to do, came out in this game, 277 yards of rushing on Boise State, and most of that right up the middle. No wonder Nate Potter thinks that running up the middle every single time is an effective strategy for our offense because that is what he sees in practice. The offense that San Diego State ran this game is exactly the offense that Nate Potter, besides the fact of having 0 passing, Nate Potter has tried to incorporate that with Max Madsen, but the offense that San Diego State ran this game is the exact offense that Nate Potter has been trying to run, that he tried to run versus UNR, and it doesn't work because we don't have the offensive line to do that. And we aren't playing defenses that are soft enough in the middle to do that. But Boise State is. And again, it is no surprise, having seen what Boise State's defense does in the middle, it is no surprise that Nate Potter thinks that's an effective strategy because that's what he sees in practice. Boise State has no middle of the defensive line right now. Not every single run, but almost every single run from San Diego State was straight up the gut. And multiple of those weren't just 10 yards. They were 15, 20, 30-yard runs right into the teeth of the Boise State defense. Boise State obviously has some deficiencies right now on defense that they need to address. They've been strong over a year, all throughout the year. Their secondary's really stepped up, but they have some issues at linebacker. I don't think when you look at this game that it is necessarily a proper categorization of what this Boise State defense is capable of. Said a little bit versus Fresno State too. But when you have an offense that can't do anything, the defense is going to eventually get worn down and exposed. And I think what this game did overall is it exposed the will and the depth of this Boise State defense, specifically at linebacker and on the D-line. I think that is where we saw the depth exposed for this Boise State defense, as the backups were not able to compete at the same level, or they did not have the backups to be able to come in and spell the clearly tired, no Triano just getting run over in this game, clearly tired and potentially banged up defenders. Boise State didn't have that depth to be able to pull into. And we knew that with Simpson coming out, how was Boise State going to respond there? And it's not necessarily something that is a fault here. It's more of an observation because I think Boise State did what they could as far as recruiting in that position. I think we have some good recruits coming in the future, but that's why Boise State got exposed in this one. They didn't have the depth, and more importantly, didn't have the will. I was really impressed last week by the fact that our defense kept fighting. pretty much all of the opportunities that Fresno State had came off of offensive mistakes. Defense would stop them, but the offense would still do something. That didn't happen in this game. I don't know if the will was used up versus Fresno State. They had it to fight through, and then they said, show us something in this game. We'll give you our best shot, but show us something. When nothing was on the table, the defense lost the mental game. And I think that's what happened. I really do. I think that they used up their reserves versus Fresno State. They came into this one on an empty tank, did enough for the first 3 drives, and then San Diego State started to pop. That first big run, my heart just dropped because I just knew, there it is. That's the last pebble that falls from the dam before it bursts wide open. That's the crack. The finger has been removed and the water is rushing through. That moment right there, it was a gut shot, and the rest of the defensive performance really trickled off of that one play. Boise State, in that moment, losing the mental game against the San Diego State offense, who really did whatever they wanted to overall in this matchup from start to finish. So defensively for Boise State, unfortunately, it is also going to have to be a low grade. I'm going to give it a D-. So for Boise State, special teams, last one to look at here, and we're already at almost an hour overall. And this video, like I said, very, very tough one to do because it's not about analyzing a game right now. This could have almost been a separate video talking about the state of the program, because that's what we're looking at right now. That is what this game and the Fresno State game and the UNR game have all been building to, is a massive cultural deficiency in this program that starts at the very top, that starts in the coaching staff. That is where culture is built. That is the responsibility. And we don't have a culture right now for Boise State that is playing aggressively, playing to win. The focus being, everything else is great. The framework of let's go out and build up young men, and we're going to have this strong program of respect and admiration, and we're going to do all the right things, and all of that is great if it's leading to the win. That is the focus. The focus isn't just coming out and playing a game and having a good time and having fun. The fun comes from the win. That's why it's a multi-million-dollar industry. That's why your head coach is getting paid millions of dollars. That's why, as players in NIL, that's why NIL became a thing, because it is a business, and the focus is to win football games. Boise State's not playing right now like they are playing to win. If anything, they're playing to lose. Sorry, not to playing to lose. They're playing, if anything, they're playing not to lose. And for Boise State right now, a directionless program that has so many cracks throughout the entire structure, from offense to defense and even special teams. It is a program right now that is on the rocks, quite literally, has been grounded and needs to find a way to let itself free, or it is going to rot there. So I know that, again, this video has been long, but the focus has been to address the program as a whole, not necessarily just this specific game. But the game itself is symptomatic of the issues with this Boise State program. So for special teams, Boise State, Colton Boomer, 0 for 1 kicking, misses a field goal at the end of the game. It's kind of the cherry on top. Colton Boomer didn't lose this game. The coaches lost this game. But just cherry on top right there. Oscar Doyle had a pretty good game overall, 41.6 yard average. He didn't have a bad punt, but he kicked it so hard that it trickled, ended up still being like 40 yards. So not terrible overall there. There's a couple mistakes here on kick return and punt return, but at the end of the day, special teams didn't make a massive contribution. They were part of the face of the loss with the missed field goal. I think a solid C- is fair. They're not the focus. The issues on this team overall, the offense, starting the offensive coordinator that didn't come up with a game plan over an entire bye week. Boise State didn't just play Fresno State and then have to scramble to play this game. They had a bye week. So when you're looking at a staff and organization that was unable to win, and you have a bye week, there's no excuses. There's no excuses. You knew the players, the personnel you had. You knew the conditions. Everyone's been talking about how bad the weather's going to be in San Diego. You knew the conditions. You knew the field conditions. San Diego State's field is terrible. And Dylan Riley could have had a touchdown run that he slipped on because the field is so bad. You knew the field conditions. You knew the weather conditions. You knew the personnel you had, and you were unable to develop a winning program that could go out and do something effective on this field. And that is on the coaches right there. So the coaches lost this game. But overall, offense F, defense D minus, and special teams C minus. All right, lastly here, reviewing this keys to the game. Key number 1 was run. Boise State definitely focused on that, trying to, but that key was incorporated with the fact that you still have to pass. So it wasn't just you run the ball every single time. You'd still have to pass the ball, and more than that, you had to run the ball creatively. They had one sweep with They had one sweep with Cam Bates. That was a first down. They had a couple of outside runs, but over and over and again, they ran the ball up the middle like they have every single time this season in conservative moments when you need a big play, where Boise State is punting the ball, for goodness sake. When you need a big play, when it is 1st and 21, and you're just out here running the ball on 3rd and long, playing not to lose, not playing to win. You have in this case, you had nothing to lose. People didn't expect you to win. You had a backup quarterback in. Let's go out and attack this team, playing not to lose. So yeah, while Boise State did run, they didn't run the way that I wanted them to in this key that I analyzed was necessary. They weren't effective. They didn't find a way to get the quarterback involved. The way they used a cut forth in this game, you could have had a robotic ball handle, and that's it. A statue could have done what Cutforth did in this game because of what the coaches did with him. He showed he can throw. He showed he can be effective in the offense. But if you were just going to do that with him for the majority of this game and not allow him to use his arm, why even have Cutforth out there? Why not put someone that has some legs, Martinez? Why not put Sherrod at a Wildcat? He can hand the ball off. Why did Boise State go with this offensive scheme? That is a question that should be getting answered with a pink slip. There's no excuse for it. No excuse. And again, when you hear the head coach come out and say absolute confidence after that, after a week to 2 weeks to prepare for this game, and you see that, that is where the frustration builds in this fan base and where the thought process of what are we doing at the coaching position right now? What is the focus? What is the mentality? Is the mentality the team needs to win? Or is the mentality we need to develop relationships within the organization? You can have both, but the priority always has to be the team. The team has to come first above everything else. Everything. The team has to come first above it all. And when you see what we saw and you hear what we heard, that now starts to get questioned. So overall, I'll give it a B because they did intentionally try to run this ball, and they did get Dylan Riley the touches that he needed. And even a B plus I think would be worthy of it. But the offense as a whole was an issue, and this should have been a factor, not the only thing that Boise State did. Key number 2 of Boise State defense sets the tone. They did that for 3 drives, and then were no longer a factor in this game. And so, unfortunately, it's going to match the same grade as defense overall, so D minus. And build your culture. We have talked about it. Did not happen. Did not happen on any facet of this game. Now, Boise State did cut down its defensive penalties, but they had just as many offensive penalties. Amazingly surprise offensive penalties. A face mask call on a running back. A holding call on the same running back on a key 4th down play where Cutforth actually completes the pass and could have kept the drive alive and given Boise State a chance to go down and score and have time to maybe go win this game. And Boise State's offense, just like they have all season long, shot themselves in the foot. They're the 3rd most penalized offense in the entire country, at least coming into last week. And I can't imagine the numbers changed too much after we saw that. All 4 penalties, a crazy stat here, all 4 penalties for Boise State were on the offense. All 4 of them. And they were all in key moments. So for Boise State overall, building culture, right now that's an F. The culture for Boise State, it's not even there. Boise State has to do something to reestablish that culture if we want our kids to remember who Boise State is. If we want anybody to remember who Boise State is and not just simply be a Jeopardy question. You have to reestablish the culture, and it starts with the coaching staff. So coming into this next week, I'll have my preview video coming out here in a few days. Boise State is already favored, coming up against Colorado State, favored by 15.5 points. Kind of shows you how bad Colorado State is right now. So there's opportunity to end this season on a high note, but it won't matter. It won't matter if the same people who've been responsible for the decline of this program so far are still in charge. If Nate Potter is still the offensive coordinator coming through into next year, this program will not be set up in a position to succeed. It just won't. So Boise State, And there's not even anything that is necessarily Nate Potter can prove at this point. We've had the entire season. We're 2 games away from the end of the year for the regular season. We are there. We're there. The product is there. You know who the coordinator is that you have, and they're not up to the task. And it hurts to say that. Very few times have we had to call for somebody to be fired as Boise State fans. Most of the time, the players and the coaches in those positions meet the standard that they've set for themselves, or they don't get those positions. This was a weird period of Boise State history where you didn't have an athletic director picking a head coach. You had a president of your university who had other priorities picking the head coach of your football team in Andy Avalos. I know that Jeremiah Dickey technically signed it, but he was hired within a few days of Jeremiah Dickey being announced. That decision been made. He simply signed the paperwork. So that put Boise State in this weird place. And then out of that, you have a terrible situation where a toxic culture is created and you have to fire that head coach. Well, then out of that, where do you go to? Where do you go to? And just to try and hold the team together because of the wild circumstances of how that year ends, you go with Spencer Danielson. And I'm not saying that's a mistake. I'm not saying that's a mistake. It's up to him to prove that it wasn't by being a head coach. But that's where you find yourself. And so the standards of the program gradually, quietly end up being eroded to a point where you have a second-year head coach hiring a first-year offensive coordinator after losing the entire focus of your offense without anybody else that's been proven to be able to handle the load. Nate Potter should never have been hired. Now, as a head coach, you make mistakes. That was a mistake where I think that Dirk Cutter pressured Spencer Danielson, and Spencer Danielson, because he trusts the people he works with, it's a good thing, but can also be a flaw, because he absolute trusts the people he works with, allowed in this basically Dirk Cutter to make the decision on who became the offensive coordinator. Well, I know you're a young head coach, and I know that there are a lot of challenges out there in the coaching industry, and it's not easy. But you can make up from mistakes. And if I had one thing to say to Spencer Danielson, it's that this is not the end of the road. It's not the end of the road for you as head coach of the program. It's not the end of the road for this program. But the turning point where the future of Boise State lies ahead and the end of the road lies is coming up. You know the team, you know the staff, you know the personnel that you have. You are the head coach. You've had 2 years at this point to be the head coach. This is where the decision is made. One way or the other, you get to pick the road that Boise State goes on. And I hope that Spencer Danielson picks the right one. I really do. I love him as a head coach, as a person. I love him in that position. I'm a Christian. I've been vocal about that. I love how expressive he is about his faith. But at the end of the day, you're not paid to be the pastor. You're not paid to be the life coach. You're not paid to be the mentor of the team. You are paid to be the coach. You are paid to be the decision maker. Everything else is an augmentation to who you are. And it's fantastic that he has all of those elements and that players love him and that the parents of these players love him. And that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, your job doesn't depend on how good you are in all of those areas. Your job depends on how good you do one thing. And that's make the decisions, the hard decisions as the head coach. So we'll get to see over the next couple of weeks what kind of head coach Spencer Danielson is. Is he a head coach that can put Boise State back on the same track? Or is he another variant of what we saw in Andy Avalos? That is the future of what we will see here over the next few weeks. I'm nervous. As always, I'm excited to be a Boise State fan regardless of results. I said this before the game, and it's true. I know that in the middle of June, all I'd want to do is be able to sit here and know that there's a game or two left to play, of being able to watch Boise State football. I'm not going to say it's all I live for. I have a lot of things I live for. I love my job. I love my family. I love my church. I love everything that I get to do in my life. I'm incredibly blessed, and I have a great family and all those things. But one of the things that is always throughout my whole life, and is that consistent point that no matter what stage I'm at, is Boise State football. And so regardless of what happens, what ends up happening with Boise State football, I mean, I'm always going to be a fan, and it's always going to tie me to the core center of myself and my sense of identity going back to being a kid. It's always going to be there, and I'm always going to look forward to a Boise State game no matter what. But at the same time, it does feel like right now is a historic point for Boise State, and I hope that my kids are able to feel the same way about Boise State that I do. So thanks so much for watching. Please let me know your thoughts. I want to have the conversation with each of you, where you're feeling, where you're at, what your thoughts are for this program. I apologize for going long, and I apologize for this video coming out late. It's not, I promise it won't be a trend. I promise I will continue to work to get these videos out sooner, and not every loss is going to result in the game being 24 hours later, or the review being 24 hours later. So I apologize for that. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you pick yourself up a bottle of Horseshoe Spirits liquor. I have a bad tendency of saying liqueur instead of liquor, so I do apologize if I ever do those in my videos. But make sure you grab yourself a bottle of Horseshoe Spirits liquor at any store in the Southwest of Idaho or online. Make sure, of course, that it's legal within your state and that you are 21 or older. Perfect gift. Christmas is coming for the Boise State fan in your life. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and I truly do mean it. Win or lose, go Big Blue!